Hi, hi, everybody. Welcome to a special episode of Hidden Gems podcast. And today we are, in honor of Thor: Love and Thunder, we are talking about some superhero movies, but instead of the big MCU movies, we're talking about some underrated, smaller movies that don't get talked about as much. So it's going to be really fun. And I am film critic Rachel Wagner, and Ryan is here.
Hey, Rachel, it's great to be with you as usual. And for this special episode, we got a guest, and I'm very excited to have him here.
Yes, our friend Brevon is here. And Brevon, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh yes, I'm really happy to be here, and y'all said to me like a few times on my channel, and I figured that I would lend a helping hand, so to speak, with this episode, and like I said, I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, why don't you, this is your first time on this show, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit to our audience?
To our audience, I'm Brevon Thompson from my channel Brevon's Flexing Games. Last video that I did on my channel was for The Black Phone, which I just checked out recently. I really thought it was good, and it's so far my favorite horror film this year. The only close competition it would have is the newest Scream, but I'm really hoping that the next Halloween turns out to be good. But if anybody were to ask me what's my most anticipated horror film for the rest of the year, it would probably be Nope, because I love Jordan Peele after Get Out and Us. But this weekend, I do plan to check out Thor: Love and Thunder because I'm a MCU junkie, and I'm a big fan of MCU. Yeah. And I still yet to check out Elvis, so I do plan to check that out as well. So that's two that I plan to check out this week because, yeah, I mean, I've heard nothing but good things about Elvis. So yeah, it's on my to-do list for this week.
Yeah, so we're recording this on the 5th, and we're gonna post it next week. So if you're kind of wondering if you're watching, you're wondering, so this will post on the 15th. But Ryan, did you have a good 4th?
I did. My dad and I did our annual rewatch of 1776, which is one of my all-time favorites. The movie gets better the more I watch it. It's so insanely quotable. A shout out to William Daniels, Mr. Feeney from Boy Meets World, who is John Adams in the show and in the movie, and he is excellent. I love how, despite the fact that we all know what happens, the Declaration of Independence does get signed and the U.S. does get created. There's a certain part in the movie when John Adams loses the entire South over the slavery issue. You're just like, no! And it's the most darkest timeline you could ever ask for. And even though you know exactly what's going to happen, but the movie makes you doubt. It's so well done. And I don't think, even though you know what's going to happen deep down inside, I still get goosebumps of being like, just get rid of the slavery passage. You're going to lose the South and Rutledge and all of those idiots, but you got to bring them in anyway. So it's distressing to say the least, but the songs are awesome. It's insanely quotable. I love the quote where John Adams and Ben Franklin are waiting for Thomas Jefferson to come out of his bedroom, and John Adams is like, oh, the history books will never remember me. That's funny because he's the second president of the United States. But then Adams is like, oh, they'll remember Ben Franklin because they'll always remember Ben Franklin. They'll picture Ben Franklin struck the ground and brought up George Washington full grown from the ground on his horse, and then with his right hand raised the Continental Army and wiped out the British Army with one fell stroke. And Ben Franklin just turns and he's like, I like it. It's so good.
That's perfect.
I recommend everyone check out that movie if you haven't.
Yeah, it's really fun. I agree. If you like Hamilton, I think you also will like 1776. So, well, we're talking about superhero movies today. And like I said, we're talking about smaller or underrated, not given enough love superhero movies. And we each came up with 3 on our list. And It's not streaming kind of like what we normally do. But in your mind, Brevon, what do you think makes for a good, memorable superhero movie, big or small?
Well, for me personally, and this is one that's kind of personal for me, the first one that I'm going to start off with was, and it's one that I first saw in theaters when I was like around like 6 years old. And it's the first Hellboy, directed by Guillermo del Toro and starring Ron Perlman as Hellboy. Because when you think of like uh, great performances for comic book films. I mean, you often think of Christopher Reeve as Superman or Hugh Jackman as Wolverine or Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. I would probably say that Ron Perlman as Hellboy would definitely fit in that category of like on that list of performances for comic book films, because I like how even though this character is a demon, he's just such a likable character, and that's a few things that I liked about Ron Perlman's performance as Hellboy. I mean, and it does deliver us like some good, like decent action sequences, even though like some of the CG is like a little bit dated here and there. I like what they go with the story, even though like the villains aren't really that interesting, even though they approve that in the sequel, because I think the villain in the sequel, which I'll talk about later, is a lot better. His motivations are much more understandable. Well, the villains in this film are kind of like the stereotypical bad guys who just want to unleash these creatures to destroy the world. But that's about it, really. But and we all know how good of a filmmaker Guillermo del Toro is because of films like The Shape of Water, which won Best Picture. And I think in terms of like comic book films, I mean, what he delivers in this film as well as the sequel, and before that he did Blade 2, which I really enjoy. What he did for those two films in particular, those are like really important to me. I mean, even back then as a kid. Well, here's a funny thing. I mean, when I first saw the trailer when I was like 6, I was hooked, and I really wanted to see it, even though my dad kind of warned me, you know, like this is the type of film that kind of like has like scary monsters and everything. But 6-year-old me did not care. So Hellboy will always have like a special place in my heart because of Ron Perlman as Hellboy. I mean, he's charismatic. He delivers some awesome action sequences. And given like the makeup work in the film, I mean, both on Ron Perlman and Doug Jones as Abe Sapien, I mean, you guys got to give him the makeup artists a round of applause for the amount of like work and effort they had to go through to bring these characters to life. Because we all know how Del Toro is with like creatures in certain films that he directs, and he's like one of those directors who he has like like one of those directors that has like an eye for visuals. I think Del Toro is like one of those filmmakers who are like the best at that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've seen this movie. It's been a while, but yeah, I felt like it did have a pretty big heart to it, which always endears you to any film, but superhero films included. But what do you think, Ryan? What do you think makes for a really memorable superhero movie in your mind?
Well, just like the comic books are based on, it really is it really is dependent on it's dependent on the source material and just how the heart that is there, like what Brevon was talking about with Hellboy. Hellboy is the son of the devil, pretty much, and yet we feel a great deal of sympathy for him. Like we relate to him in certain aspects. And so if there's a certain relatability to the characters, I think that people can buy most anything. If we can connect, we can usually get like on a human level with with them, if that makes any
Mhm.
sense at all. And talking about Hellboy for a second, I just love how there's a scene, I guess a spoiler, but after the death of the John Hurt character, Professor Broom, uh, Hellboy has just a really somber moment where he's talking to Liz, and he's just like, I wished I could just change this, and you're just like, wow, that's just, I feel so sad for you, my dude. And so, despite despite the picture being, oh, we're actually rooting for the son of the devil, the movie's so well made that we connect to it. And so I think
Yeah.
what makes it work is the connectivity of it all.
Yeah, I like the connectivity too. I know some people don't really like that with the MCU, but to me, I kind of like putting the pieces together of the different films and different characters and different series. I think that makes it more fun. And I also enjoy sort of the witty banter. I know other people don't like it as much as me, but I think sometimes superhero movies take themselves too seriously, and it's just like, okay, calm down. Like, you don't need to be like, and it just becomes kind of one note to me, where it's like, can we have like a little bit of joy? But it just depends. Some of these smaller ones that I've picked out do have that element of kind of humor that when it's done right, it really works for me.
Yeah, kind of just a thought that appeared to my head. In Thor: The Dark World, which is one of those MCU movies that nobody really likes except for me, I actually
Mm-hmm.
kind of like that one. There's a
I
great
think it's okay.
there's a great scene where Thor and Loki are running away from the Asgardian guard, and
Mhm.
and Loki's talking to Thor while Thor's trying to get away, and Loki's being like the ultimate backseat driver, and he's like, they're getting closer, and Thor is like, I know, you telling me them getting closer does not mean we're getting farther from them. It's so funny, and they just diving under things, and Loki's just trolling him all the way. And I love when Thor takes out a statue, and Loki just turns to him and he's like, you just shot your grandfather. It's so good. And so
Yeah,
it's
I,
so fun.
I have a hard time hating anything with Thor and Loki. I think they're so great and such fun characters. I mean, that movie definitely has its share of problems, but it's not my least favorite of the MCU, like it is for a lot of people. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
Poor
think they're so
Christopher.
charismatic and great.
Poor
I
Christopher
do think it
Eccleston.
has its entertaining moments for the most part. Although the
Mm-hmm.
villains are like completely forgettable, but
Yeah.
as like one of the lesser, like I don't hate it as like most people do. In regard, I don't think it's the worst MCU movie. I would say Eternals like takes that title for me, but
Yeah, I didn't love
uh,
Eternals.
yeah. For the most part, and when it comes to Thor: The Dark World, the best thing I could say was I wasn't bored.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I have an unpopular opinion because my least favorite MCU movie is Spider-Man: Far From Home. I really didn't like that movie. So you can send the hate mail here.
Poor Christopher Eccleston. He deserved better.
Yeah, you did. That's true.
Yeah. Even he admitted like how poorly developed his character was in that film, and you can't help but feel sorry for him, really.
Yeah, what's your least favorite, Ryan?
Well,
MCU?
originally my least favorite was Iron Man 2. However, I've been wanting to rewatch it to do a bit of a reevaluation since the MCU is about to turn 15 years old, which is crazy to me. But I remember seeing the OG Iron Man in theaters and thinking, oh, this is going to be nice to see how long this lasts 15 years later. But there's gems of good ideas in Iron Man 2, but the banter of just people shouting at each other, just improv stuff, and just the whole Pepper Potts like ripping into Tony is like, you were dying and you didn't even tell me, and Iron Man's like, I was going to tell you, I was going to make you an omelet and tell you. It's just, like, it's funny for a certain point, but when it goes on and on and on, you're just like,
can we get to a different scene?
Yeah. One person talk, one person respond. That's all I need right now. And
Yeah, that's the
again,
problem. The main problem with that movie, aside from feeling rushed, is that you just can't have Tony being that unlikable for that long. It's just not effective.
yeah, and
Although there was one thing about like Iron Man 2 that they kind of like made better in Winter Soldier, because remember the secretary who like wanted to, the senator who wanted Tony to surrender his Iron Man technology. They brought him back for Winter Soldier, and it was revealed that he was a part of Hydra. So in a way, his role made much more sense. So when you look at Winter Soldier, you're like, oh, so that's why you were on Tony so much.
Well, that's what's nice about the MCU, is that you can go back and kind of, you can maybe a plot line spot there that didn't work. You can readdress it. A character that didn't end up working, you can bring him back, him or her back, and try it again. And that makes, something like Thor: The Dark World. That movie played in big time into Endgame, surprisingly, and who would have thought? So I don't know. I think that's a fun part about the whole series, but
yeah, it is.
And also poor Mickey Rourke, like the dude, like had a legitimately interesting character arc with Whiplash, and he was just completely shunted for just another dude in a suit. And no offense to Sam Rockwell, he's a great actor, but we did not need to see Justin Hammer. He could have come later, but really all of Iron Man's villains were basically dudes in suits. Obadiah Stane in Iron Man 1, Justin Hammer in number 2, and Aldrich Killian in number 3. And don't get me started on Iron Man 3, the whole Mandarin twist.
Because that's the thing, is that people are like,
that was very frustrating. The whole Mandarin twist, if they wanted to like find a way to piss off Iron Man fans, they succeeded.
But I don't think that's the problem, is that it's not comic book accurate. And people are like, oh, you're just complaining about no, it's not the fact that it's the twist. It's that it was a stupid twist because they replaced an interesting character with a bland, completely forgettable character. That's the problem. It's not that the twist exists. It's what it was.
And shout out to Shang-Chi for making the Nigel thing actually work.
Yeah, so that's what good.
That's what I love the most about that movie. They completely just buried that twist in a shallow grave, and I will love that movie forever and ever for it. But let's Brevon was talking about Hellboy the original. I think Rachel.
Yes.
Why don't we get to your first choice, The Phantom Boy?
Yes. So my first choice, we're really talking a small movie. We did it for Obscure Animation a couple of years ago. It's from 2015. It's called Phantom Boy, and it's by the same group of animators that did a movie called A Cat in Paris that got nominated for an Academy Award. And this is a really neat little movie. It kind of has a cubist design to it, and it's about a boy who he is getting treatment in the hospital, and while he's sick, he develops these powers that at night he can separate from his body and go and fly around the city of New York. Well, there ends up being this police officer who gets injured. He ends up in a wheelchair. He can't look into the case, and he's trying to find out about this mafia guy, and so he so the boy, he ends up going after the mafia guy for I think his name is The Face is his name, and while he's separated from his body. And it's very beautifully animated, like it says, a sort of cubist kind of approach. If people have seen A Cat in Paris, it's very similar, except this is in New York instead of Paris, as far as the visual, the world building. And it's just a very well done, underrated, beautiful little animated film. Yeah. I don't think it's on any streaming services. But you can rent it. So have you heard of this at all, Ryan?
I have not, and it sounds really interesting,
Yeah.
especially the whole separating from one's body part. I think that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, and it's done in this very like blue translucent kind of effect. It looks really good. So it's one worth checking out. And like I said, we did a whole episode of obscure animation on it. So if you want more analysis, you can check that out.
Yeah, Brevon, what say you?
Well, this is one that I haven't heard about it until like Rachel like recommended it for her channel. So I couldn't find it on like any streaming services, and I was surprised. I was shocked that I couldn't find it. I was like, oh no, I can't find it. But so I had to look up a trailer, and I was like, this animation is really impressive, and I'm actually intrigued to actually check it out, because I really like some of the, one of those films that has like beautiful animation and has a great story to it. And from what I saw and from the plot synopsis, I didn't I try to avoid spoilers as much as possible whenever I want to check something out, even though if it's old or not. Above all, it does look interesting, and it's something I definitely look forward to checking out in the future.
And like I said, it's one that you can rent for on any of the services. It's there on Amazon or Vudu or anything like that, or YouTube. So it's available for a rental. And it seems like the kind of thing that will eventually be on Canopy. It seems like that kind of thing. So I would keep an eye out for that as well, if you have a free library app. So that's my first pick.
So my first choice, and this is a little on the beaten path, but it's one of those movies that when I first saw it, I fell in love with it, and the love has just grown. And so I'm going with The Mask of Zorro. This was directed by Martin Campbell, who would go on to reinvent James Bond twice with GoldenEye and Casino Royale. He would direct the Green Lantern movie, but we will forgive him for that. And this movie stars Anthony Hopkins, Antonio Banderas, and Catherine Zeta-Jones, and it is based on the Zorro pulp novels that would later become comics in later times. And this movie is just awesome. It was released in 1998 when comic book movies were just basically Spawn and Batman wearing a suit that looks like it was particularly cold that day. So it was a dark time. But Mask of Zorro came along and was like, all right, let me show you how it's done. The action in this is superb. The sword fights are awesome. The acting is really solid. I mean, can't go wrong with this entire cast, especially Antonio Banderas, yes, but especially Anthony Hopkins. You can't go wrong with him there. And just I guess the hero's journey, for lack of a better term, of Antonio Banderas' character going from this basically thief, losing his brother to Captain Love, to just working his way up to the Zorro mantle and finally exacting revenge. I also love how near the knuckle this movie is. This movie's PG-13. There's some dark stuff in here too. There's a scene where Alejandro is in disguise and he's meeting with Captain Love, the corrupt Union general, and they're having this meeting, and Captain Love is just casually discussing, did you know that the Campa Indians of central Peru used to cannibalize their victims' heads? The eyes were the most sought after. Seeing through the eyes of an enemy was most prized. And then casually he's just like, oh, where are my manners? Would you like something to drink? And he brings this big old thing with Alejandro's brother's head in a jar with with water in it. And you're just like, what in the world? And then he brings up another one with his brother's foot in a wine jar, and you're just like, oh my god. And then Alejandro's line when he says, you are a sick man, Captain Love. I'm like, thank you, chairman, for the entire theater saying what we're all thinking in the minute. So yeah, this movie is just so fantastic and so very well made. I miss Zorro. I guess the closest Zorro movie we'll ever get is the Puss in Boots movies. We're getting one later this year. But I mean, Zorro in cat form, I mean, that's as close as we're probably going to get.
Basically.
Yeah, this is a really fun one. I don't really think of it as a superhero movie, but I guess he is a hero in a way. But very charming. Catherine Zeta-Jones is great, and I guess they did a sequel. I never saw it, but I heard it wasn't very good. That's why I never saw it. But yeah, I think Martin Campbell. I think that he's like an incredibly inconsistent director, but his highs are really high.
The very
Very
definition of peaks and valleys. Peaks,
Yes.
GoldenEye, Casino Royale, Mask of Zorro. Valleys, Green Lantern, and and just like
Yeah, there was one this year that I guess was really bad. I didn't see it. I forget. Anyway, so Brevon, what's your next one? Pick.
Well, right before, I want to like discuss my thoughts on Mask of Zorro.
Oh yeah, please.
Oh yeah, this was like I recall like watching this first when I went over to my grandfather's condo one summer as a kid, because I mean whenever I went over to his condo, we would normally like watch either James Bond movies or other classic movies. Without my grandfather, I wouldn't be a James Bond lover. So when it comes to like Mask of Zorro, I mean, with this being released in '98, this was definitely. I would almost consider this a superhero film, even though you said earlier that you don't consider this a superhero film. I do like this film because of Martin Campbell's direction, given like his work on GoldenEye and Casino Royale, which are two of my absolute favorite James Bond films. The performances with mostly the ones that stand out for me personally are, of course, Antonio Banderas and Anthony Hopkins. I like how the story plays out. Mostly in the beginning, and like Ryan says, Antonio Banderas' like journey to like becoming the new Zorro. How it plays out in the revenge story aspect, I think is handled brilliantly, and I like how this was like one of those films that kind of like gave like superhero movies a new lease on life, because like Batman and Robin did a lot of damage back then, as well as Spawn. But other than like this coming out in '98, this also came out the same year as Blade, which definitely also helped like boost. Gave some new life into the superhero genre, along with the original X-Men and Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man film. And I would definitely put it on that list of like superhero films that gave new life into the genre.
I guess I don't really think of it as a superhero movie because he doesn't have superpowers, but I guess not all, even in the MCU, not all of them have superpowers. So I guess but that's just why I didn't think of it off the top of my head. But the one from this year that he did, Mark Campbell, is called Memory.
Oh, no
Liam
one.
Neeson.
I remember seeing the poster and I was like, I should get around to that, and I did.
Yeah. Well, Brevon, so what's your number 2?
Well, my number 2, well, I did mention Sam Raimi in terms of Spider-Man, but one that I think is a pretty underrated gem, and that is Darkman from 1990. Mostly when you think of Sam Raimi in terms of pop culture, you would mostly recognize him from either like Evil Dead, because of his work on Evil Dead, or Spider-Man. But in terms of Darkman, I think it offers like something like very new. Something different, so to speak, while giving us something that like, I don't want to say like familiar, because it gives off like one of those like Batman vibes, because it kind of like, he's almost kind of like a Batman type character, so to speak, except this character Darkman is not rich. This was made at a time when Sam Raimi really wanted to make a superhero film. But he couldn't get rights for for Batman or the Shadow, so he made up his own character, and that's Darkman. The cast is pretty good. What you have Liam Neeson as Peyton Westlake, who he's this scientist who makes this synthetic skin to help burn victims, but he and his assistant are attacked by a group of gangsters, and they kill his assistant, and they disfigure him beyond recognition. So he seeks revenge on those who disfigured him. I like how the revenge aspect is handled in this film. The Like I said, the performances here are pretty good. Liam Neeson is awesome, and I'm pretty sure I don't have to tell anybody that because he's always awesome. This was one of the first few films that made Liam Neeson an action star, and then this was way before he appeared as Qui-Gon in The Phantom Menace. But even before then, and after this film, he just starred in a Best Picture winner, which was Schindler's List. And what Liam Neeson goes through in this film, you do sympathize with him, and because of what has happened to him, you want him to get revenge on these gangsters. His love interest, played by Frances McDormand, I think that she and Liam Neeson have a good chemistry, and she ends up being the damsel in distress for the third act. The villains, at least one of them is interesting. Durant, I think, is the best villain, although Streck, I think, is forgettable even at the third act. But as far as the action sequences go, I'd say that the helicopter scene is definitely the standout action set piece of the film. Sam Raimi's direction is one of the few things that makes the film great, and I think that because of this, it made him the perfect choice back then in the 2000s to direct his Spider-Man films. And even though I love Spider-Man over Darkman, I still like to think of Darkman as one of those rare superhero films that you should definitely check out, and you'll grow to appreciate over time.
Cool. Yeah, I had never heard of this. This was the one that you kind of, when we came to me about this idea, that this was the one that you first suggested. So it's definitely interesting. I like Sam Raimi, so it's kind of interesting that he did this film. Because he's so well known for these other super movies. But yeah, it's a good one for obscure because I never heard of it.
Yeah, I had heard of this one, but I've never seen it. The only thing that I know about it, I've seen this clip before. It's where Liam Neeson's holding this dude over a ledge, and the dude's like, "You can't drop me. You won't be able to live with that." And then Neeson drops him, and he screams on the way down. And Neeson's like, "I'm beginning to learn to live with a lot of things." That's the only thing I know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Ryan, what's your number 2?
So my number two is Chronicle. This is from 2012. This was directed by Josh Trank and written by Max Landis, and let's just get that out of the way. That's a very troublesome pair, to say the least. But the movie that they created is actually quite good. It is a found footage movie. That is an immediate turnoff for some people, but trust me, the movie's actually better than people remember. I have a full review on my channel if you all feel so inclined. But basically, long story short, it's a movie about these 3 high schoolers who, when they're at a party together, they discover this magical rock or meteorite or something. They get zapped by it, and the next thing you know, they have superpowers. They have the ability to levitate things, to push things away, to stop things from hitting them. And then they eventually get the power of flight. And they try to initiate rules on each other to say okay, we can't hurt anyone. We have to use these for good, something like that. But the main character, played by Dane DeHaan, who has an alcoholic father and is frequently bullied at school. At a certain point, he just snaps and basically becomes a supervillain. So this is definitely, I would say, more of a supervillain than a superhero movie, but I'm deciding to count it because they do start off as heroes, but then the heel turn happens later. I can understand why people dislike found footage movies. I can't argue with their logic, but this is definitely one of the better ones. It uses the gimmick in about as good a way as possible. I mean, you have to suspend your disbelief a bit, especially around the ending where it's like, oh, come on, how many cameras would be working? Like, surely they'd be able to like zap some of them or something. But outside of that, I think it's all handled pretty well. Dane DeHaan is really good, and he would go on to be better in other things. Michael B. Jordan is in here. We all know what he would do. Black Panther, the Creed movies. I could go on. The dude is completely killing it right now. Honestly, the actor who I've seen the least is the cousin of Dane DeHaan in the movie. I can't think of his name right now, but he's I don't think he's done all of that much since Chronicle, and it's a shame because he is actually quite good. And if he has done something and I might have missed it, then by all means correct me in the comments. But I think that he did a really good job here. And in terms of the budget that was provided and what ended up and the end results, I think it was all handled very well. I give this a heavy recommendation.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty good movie. I think any genre or movie making style can be done well, and I think this is done well. And with the found footage, and I think that it does portray pretty accurately, I think, what it would be like for teenagers to get superpowers. You know, the kind of, they're sort of goofy, and at least at first, and kind of showing off and everything. And I think that there definitely would at least be some of that.
Yeah, because they actually start off doing kind of stupid things like moving cars across the parking lot and building Lego Sears towers because they're in Seattle, and screwing with people in convenience stores, that kind of stuff. Dane DeHaan's character actually bends a fork with his mind, which is actually pretty cool. Then something happens and you're like, okay, the fun is officially over. And then so at a certain point, like, Dane DeHaan just goes slowly more and more and more towards the dark side. And that's all I will say, because my review here honestly doesn't do it justice.
Well, my second choice is from Disney. It's a movie called Sky High. And I think maybe you could classify as a bit of a cult following for this movie. It's got its fans, but I think it's a really fun little movie with Kurt Russell and Kelly Preston as these superhero parents whose kid can't figure out what his superpower is, and he's going to Sky High, and and Danielle Pennebaker's in it. She's fun.
Bruce Campbell and Linda Carter.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Bruce Campbell steals the show. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure I don't have to tell you that because Bruce Campbell is awesome.
Yeah. Am I clear?
He's the coach, the gym teacher. But yeah, he's great. Linda Carter is in here, which is fun. She was Wonder Woman. It's definitely, I would say, an underrated Disney film.
Yeah, and I also love some of the names in this movie. Like, there's literally a character in this movie named Warren Peace. I'm not gonna lie, I love that. And then there's this arc who turns out to be the villain, the character, and the main character, the son of Kelly Preston and Kurt Russell. They go on a date, and the father meets him at the door, and she goes in, and the father just casually is like, "You're not the guy with the 8 arms, are you?" and the guy's like, "No, that's not me." I love how casual they are with that in this movie. And also, shout out to the music video for "I Melt with You" by Bowling for Soup. I still listen to that to this day. To use what the kids say today, the song slaps. It really does.
Yeah.
Very good. Right. So let's see. So Brevon, are you next?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my third and final pick is, and since I talked about the original Hellboy, I figured I'd talk about the sequel, which I think is a lot better, and Del Toro himself would say is his favorite in terms of the series. I recall seeing this in 2008, and I was like, "Yep, this is definitely better than the first one." And Ron Perlman is still likable as always as the character Hellboy. What they do in this film, I think it's better paced than the first film. I like how they improve on the action, and the villain, Prince Nuada, who's played by Luke Goss. You understand his motivations. You understand why he is upset with humanity and why he wants to wipe them out and to make the world a better place for his people, and how he thinks that Hellboy is fighting for the wrong cause. And there are times where, you understand his motivations, but you don't agree with what he is doing. Killing innocent people. But what other the other things that they do with the story? I love the subplot of Liz, Hellboy's love interest, being pregnant, and her hiding this from him for most of the film until she makes the choice to have the Angel of Death save him, and she decides to reveal that he's going to be a father. There are stakes in this film, and you do care about the characters. And I remember being shocked when Prince Nuada stabbed Hellboy with his enchanted spear, and you're like, we're all used to seeing Hellboy kicking ass and everything, but there's one of the few times where you felt like he could actually die. And I like a certain comic book film that has stakes, and that's one of the few films that I recall in terms of comic book movies back then that did have stakes. Of course, I love the costume designs and the makeup work done for certain characters, mostly for Hellboy and Abe. This was, the makeup work was nominated for an Oscar. And it's a shame that it didn't win because, like I said, what they done with the previous film, you got to give the artists a round of applause. And one thing that always frustrated me was how the film ended with Liz revealing that she's pregnant with twins, and I'm like, and they left it open for a third film, which of course never happened, and it really makes me feel sad that Del Toro never had a chance to finish what he originally wanted to conceive as a trilogy, and Ron Perlman has been trying to get Del Toro to make a third movie, and he's refused to play Hellboy again unless Del Toro was involved. And because of that, I'm really sad that we never got a third film in this series, because it did have potential to be a trilogy, and we got the reboot, which I just want to acknowledge never existed. It had potential to be good. David Harbour was good in the reboot, but it was nowhere near as good as the films that we got from Guillermo del Toro, which I will always have a special place in my heart.
I've never seen this. I've only seen the first one, so I can't comment. But you definitely sold it well. So, Ryan, what do you think?
Well, first of all, you're being incredibly generous, Brevon, in regards to the David Harbour movie. Bless his soul, he was trying, but that movie is terrible. It just makes me so mad, but I will table my thoughts on that for another time. Hellboy 2 is awesome. Like, there is just so much stuff to love. And you brought up, Brevon, you brought up Prince Nuada. He is fantastic. There's like outside of the action stuff, there's some lines that he gives where you're just like, dang, you're the bad guy, but I mean, you're kind of fighting for your people. So, I mean, I kind of give you a bit of respect there, but up to a certain extent. Like, when he's with his father and the rest of his people, I can't remember their names off the top of my head, what they call themselves, but there's this line where the prince is ranting and raving about how empty the humans feel, and he's like, holes in their hearts that will never be filled. They will never have enough. And you're just like, yeah, there's a kernel of truth there. And so you feel it, but like the dynamic between him and his sister, the sister feeling sorry for the humans and wanting to help them, and how she wants to just let the Golden Army sleep, and if we fade, we fade. And I love how his delivery where he says, we will not fade. And it's just so good. And like Brevon, you were mentioning, the makeup is awesome. The troll market scene, that's fantastic. And the work on Johan.
It's a Del Toro film for sure. And in regards to the princess, I thought that her and Abe's love story was handled pretty well, and it was pretty sad how it ends at the end with her dying. Yeah,
that was very, very sad. And there's actually quite a few humorous moments here, like when Hellboy faces off against Nuada's Heavy. I can't remember his name, with the dude with the hand that ratchets out and returns. And,
Mr. Wink.
Yeah, Mr. Fink. Thank you. And and it's like they've been fighting, and then Hellboy crushes the metal hand with his right hand, and Hellboy just takes a break with his cigar, and he's like, "You lost, buddy. Take the hint." And Fink readies the next punch, not knowing that there's like a crusher behind him, and you can pretty much see where it's going. And Hellboy's like, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." And then Fink does it anyway. Hellboy sidesteps, and the fist enters. It's so darkly humorous, but it is humorous. And you just see Hellboy just look, and he just does that with the chain. He's like, dung, and he's just like, wow.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of the humor, the scene of the locker room scene made me laugh my ass off. I watch that every time. I never get tired of that. I never get tired of that. I never get tired of it.
Hellboy gets his butt kicked by smoke, by actual smoke. And then that parlays into the whole Abe and Hellboy getting drunk scene and sitting along to, I want to say, Barry Manilow? I can't remember, but the song is, "You Know I Can't Smile Without You." It's that song. And they get drunk, and Abe he gets drunk too, and he's like, "This is the last one." It's like, it straddles the line between humorous and incredibly dark, and Del Toro did it beautifully.
So, so my last pick is a movie. We just talked about it for underrated animation on my channel, me and Stanford. It is Megamind. Megamind came out the same year as Despicable Me. Despicable Me is the one that took off, and I think that's a shame because I think Megamind is super funny. I think the script is really good. I think the animation is really good. I just think it's better than Despicable Me in pretty much every way, and it actually has some of that satire for superhero movies. And even though it was 2010, so they just kind of, this new wave had just started, but I just really think it's very, very funny, and I like Megamind as a character, and I just think it's better than Despicable Me, so that's why I think it's underrated.
Funny how you say that. I recall actually seeing this in theaters, and yeah, I do like Megamind a lot as well, and it's very funny. As far as it being better than Despicable Me, That's kind of tough for me to decide because they're both very good. But if anyone,
just,
I would say I like them equally. That's
yeah.
what I can say. Yeah.
I've just never been the biggest fan of the Minions. I've always found them kind of annoying. Like there's a few of the movies that are fine, but I don't know. I just personally find Megamind to be so much funnier personally.
Yeah. Funny that you say that because I mean, Megamind, he like the whole movie is like centered around this character. You love every moment that he's on screen, and what his journey from like starting from like a supervillain into eventually becoming a hero by the end. I really love his journey throughout the film. How he believes that he killed his arch nemesis, Metro Man, who's voiced by Brad Pitt. Will Ferrell, I thought it was really, really good voicing Megamind. So he has a plan to like create his own hero, Titan, who's voiced by Jonah Hill. And of course, it completely backfires, and he ends up becoming a villain. And Megamind has to like become a hero, defeat him, and save the day. What they do for that story, I think it was executed pretty well.
Yeah. Ryan, what do you think about this?
I think Megamind is very good. I'm looking forward to discussing it with Jacob when we get to it on our new show discussing DreamWorks over on his channel. So I'm looking forward to rewatching it. And it's funny because you get to see what happens when the villain gets to win at the end. And there is a bit of a twist, which I won't spoil in case anyone hasn't seen it, but you get to see what happens when Megamind, like, you get to see what happens when Lex Luthor defeats Superman, when Joker beats the Batman. It's a bit more humorous, and it's done with original characters and not something we know in greater comic book lore. But it's interesting to see what kind of happens when the villain gets to win at the end, and how there's a dynamic of their weird sort of yins and yangs of each other. There's a feeling of, I have a feeling we're going to do this forever kind of thing, that if one leaves, it is like the other one just doesn't have a purpose anymore. I love how that's explored. I like that. I like the spirit of that.
Yeah, me too. All right, Ryan, what's your last pick?
So my last choice, and I have an entire review of this on my channel if you want to check it out, but it's The Rocketeer. This is a movie that I have loved since the first time I saw it, based on the comics and pulp novels by Dan Stevens, and it drives me nuts that this movie did not take off, and it's gotten more love nowadays, but it makes me really sad that no one took this seriously when it came out, because it was way ahead of its time. Directed by Joe Johnson, who directed Captain America: The First Avenger, so the dude knows his way around a period piece. Stars Alan Arkin, Timothy Dalton, Jennifer Connelly, Paul Sorvino. The cast is loaded. Really, the only person who didn't really go that far is the dude who plays the Rocketeer. It's really sad because he was charismatic, good looking, could more than hold his own. Like, all he did really after this was TV work, and good on him for doing that, but at the same time, there was so much potential left on the table so maybe there's a reason that I just don't know about, but it makes me sad that he didn't do more afterwards. But I just love the spirit that this movie has. I just love the intrigue of the Timothy Dalton character, Neville St. Clair. I love just the rocket shenanigans around the Rocketeer, and I love the banter between the Rocketeer and Peavy, how when Rocketeer puts on the helmet for the first time and he's like, "How do I look?" and Peavy's like a hood ornament. I just love that line so much. And I don't know, it's just one of those movies that I have a hard time explaining why I love it, but I just love it. It's clear-cut good guys and bad guys. It's something that we don't really see much nowadays in this world where we've got like stuff like The Boys and other things. I kind of yearn for when we had like clear white and clear black. Not in everything, but like noticeable in most instances, if that makes any sense at all.
I I really agree with you. This is such a wholesome, entertaining film. It's really, really good. And yeah, I agree with you about the villain thing that Disney especially has been just moving away from having heroes and villains. And aside from maybe in Marvel, is in their animated films and their other films, everything's got to be this complex backstory, and you got to understand. And sometimes it's just I just miss the day of like the juicy, entertaining, over the top Disney villain. So that I think is a loss. But I agree. Rocketeer is a really fun, old fashioned family film. I should do it for family movie night one of these days.
Yeah, and shout out to Timothy Dalton for having one of the greatest villain deaths of all time.
Yeah.
He straps on the rocket not knowing that gas is leaking everywhere and he's going to turn into the Human Torch, but it's not going to end well for him when he says, "I will miss Hollywood," and then he hits the thing and he flies out and he's like, "Ha ha 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 ha," and it's like bang, 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 and it's like, well, sucks to be you, Neville. It's such poetic justice.
Yeah.
That's kind of hilarious.
Yeah. All right. We did it. We did it. Thank you so much, Brevon, for having this idea to do this. It was a lot of fun. And where can people find you and your content?
If you want to know, if you want to see more content, you can check out my channel, Brevon's Flicks and Games. And of course, as always, thank you so much for watching. And I want to thank Rachel and Ryan for inviting me on the show. And if you want my thoughts on old or new films, you know where to find me.
And Ryan, what about you?
People can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at RyanCam20. And there's, of course, my YouTube channel, which is just called Ryan Cam. I will be reviewing Thor Love and Thunder. I do plan on seeing that Friday night. And then coming this Sunday, against my better judgment, I will be reviewing Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, including in my series where I review all the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Every ounce of my being wants to just stay away from those movies and just say, hey, I reviewed the trilogy, and the trilogy is what counts. But there are 2 more Pirates movies to cover, so I will be covering those.
I feel sorry for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a rough franchise, in my opinion. But
yeah,
but
it's definitely a hit and miss franchise for sure.
Especially the first one is really good, but the rest I struggle. But you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check that out. Make sure you check out our playlist, all our Hidden Gems episodes, and got lots of fun stuff going on the channel. And also we are having the patron picks for Family Movie Night. So consider joining the patron and you can get your pick. So check that out. Also check out Hallmarkies podcast. A lot of fun stuff going on over there. And thanks so much again, Brevon. We appreciate it. And we'll talk to y'all later. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.